Hello and welcome to Go For It. I'm your host, Paul Gannon. For the next hour, we're going to be talking sports and having fun doing it with all your ideas, all your opinions, and all your beliefs. And of course, as always, you will get a heavy dose of my opinion. Great show lined up for you today. We got a lot to talk about. A lot to talk about in the world of sports. We're going to get to Lamar Jackson and Carson Wentz and their struggles at this point of the season. We got to talk some boxing. Canelo Alvarez is a free agent. And we also got to talk about Tank Davis. And last weekend, he had an impressive performance against Leo Santa Cruz. We're going to talk about what's possibly next for Tank. So we got a lot to talk about here, and we're going to get right down to it. So let's get started. So let's look at the situation now. We can look at Carson Wentz and the Philadelphia Eagles, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Two quarterbacks that are kind of struggling at this point of the season, especially Carson Wentz. I mean, Carson Wentz leads the NFL in interceptions. He's been a turnover machine throughout the course of this season. He's fumbling. He's throwing interceptions. He's not playing good football right now. But here's the reality of his situation. Even though he's not playing good football, his team is 3-4-1. His team is on top of the NFC East. So even though Carson Wentz stinks at this point, you could say he stinks. He stunk last week. I'm not going to say Carson Wentz stinks, but he stunk last week against the Dallas Cowboys. In a game that the Eagles should have blew him out. That game shouldn't have been close. The Eagles should have blew the Cowboys out. I mean, Cowboys were starting Ben DiNucci. Yes, Ben DiNucci. And you say who? Yes, Ben DiNucci. The Cowboys were starting Ben DiNucci, and he was awful last week for the Cowboys, and they sat him down. But, you know, it was a game where the Cowboys giving up 33 points a game. You figured this was going to be the type of game where everybody gets off, the type of game where Wentz gets off, throws for a bunch of yards, and Travis Fulgham makes a bunch of catches and has a bunch of receiving yards. You thought it was going to be one of those games for the Philadelphia Eagles, a stacked game for the Philadelphia Eagles against the Dallas Cowboys, because the Dallas Cowboys haven't stopped anybody this season. Haven't come close to stopping anybody this season. And then last week against Carson Wentz, well, they forced 3 turnovers against the Eagles, against Wentz. Wentz had a fumble and 2 interceptions. So the Cowboys defense forced Carson Wentz to turn the football over and forced Carson Wentz to be a turnover machine, forced him into being a turnover machine. The turnover machine he's been throughout the course of the season. So you thought last week if there was going to be any game where Carson Wentz was going to get off, it was going to be against the Dallas Cowboys. That didn't happen. And it is concerning. Even though the Philadelphia Eagles got the victory, even though the Philadelphia Eagles are on top of the NFC East, Carson Wentz's play is concerning. And this is a guy you gave a boatload of money, 4 years, $128 million to. So you gave him money and you invested in this quarterback. This is your guy at this point in time. Jalen Hurts is in the background at some point, and he's in the background now, and you wonder at some point when his time will come. But at this point, this is Carson Wentz's team. And you wonder why the struggles, because Carson Wentz, you know, this guy doesn't turn the football over the way he's turning it over now in terms of the interceptions. I mean, the interceptions are bad. They're bad. And he's throwing some bad picks throughout the course of this season, some bad ones. And again, 2 bad ones last week. He's thrown some bad picks. And this is a guy throughout the course of his season protected the football in terms of interceptions. He didn't have that issue. He didn't have that problem. That has never been a problem for Carson Wentz in terms of the interceptions. I mean, we look at his career, even as a rookie, he threw only 14 interceptions. He threw only 14 interceptions as a rookie and started 16 games. Only 14 picks. That's as a rookie. And then you look at the 3 years after that, it's been 7 each year. So in the last 3 years, he's thrown 21 interceptions. This season, he has 12 interceptions. So there's a chance that he could have 20 plus interception, and that's more than he's had in 3 seasons, the past 3 seasons. So there's a problem. There's an issue. What is the issue? What is the problem? Well, we could talk about the offensive line. Obviously, there's been a lot of injuries on the offensive line, whether it's Brandon Brooks in the offseason, all-pro guard who went down, whether it's Andre Dillard, the rookie left tackle. And again, we don't know how good he would have been, but hey, they did draft him high, and they expected him to maybe beat somebody, but he's out. You had Jason Peters, who's been in and out of the lineup. You had Lane Johnson, who's been in and out of the lineup. So the offensive line hasn't been good, hasn't been great at all. And then you look on the outside, the wide receivers. There's been some injuries there, whether it's Deshaun Jackson, whether it's Alshon Jeffrey not there. So they've had some injuries in terms of the wide receivers. They have some injuries in terms of the offensive line. You got Zach Ertz, who's also out, Pro Bowl tight end. So, in terms of the weapons, he hasn't had much. But he didn't have many weapons last year either. And guess what? He only threw 7 interceptions. I mean, if you remember last year, Deshaun Jackson only played one game, played maybe 1.5 games. He got hurt in the Atlanta game 2, came back later in the season, played maybe a couple snaps, and he went out, and that was it for Deshaun Jackson. But so Carson Wentz had issues in terms of weapons last year, and he only threw 7 picks. Has the issue with the weapons this year, and at this point, 8 games in, he's thrown 12 picks. So what is the issue? What is the problem? It seems like this dude is trying to do too much. I mean, you can look at the play. If you watch the game against the Dallas Cowboys, and the play where he was got sacked, but he held the ball extra long, kept holding the ball, and it looks like he rolled out the wrong way, but he kept holding the ball. He got sacked. He fumbled the football. It was just awful. It was one of the worst plays that you'll see out of a quarterback, and it's not a play that you want to see out of a fifth-year quarterback. A fifth-year quarterback should not be making those type of plays. That's a rookie quarterback move. That's what rookie quarterbacks do, not 5-year veterans. 5-year veterans don't do what Carson Wentz did in that particular situation. Remember, he rolled out. If you watch the game against the Cowboys, he rolled out, had time, waited, and he took a bad sack. You got to throw the football away. He took a bad sack. But not only did he take a bad sack, fumbled the football. So he fumbled the football, and in addition, he took a bad sack. It was just bad. And throughout that game, it was just bad after bad after bad. It just was bad. It was not a good look and a good day for Carson Wentz. It just wasn't. And it almost seems like Carson Wentz right now is pressing. And it seems like he's trying to make every play a big play. And as we know in terms of Brett Favre, right? Brett Favre was one of those guys who tried to make big play after big play after big play. And Brett Favre, as great as he was, threw a lot of interceptions. I mean, Brett Favre threw a lot of interceptions, had multiple seasons of 20-plus interceptions. So Brett Favre was a guy who turned the football over. Brett Favre was a guy who was a gunslinger. He was a gunslinger, and he was a guy that was willing to take some big chances. And anytime you're willing to take big chances and big risks, there's going to be sometimes big rewards, and there's sometimes going to be some big losses. And those big losses are interceptions. So, but Carson Wentz, even though he's a guy that tries to do a lot of different things and tries to make every play a big play, he still had found ways to protect the football. He still protected the football. And there's been times throughout the course of his career where at times maybe he held the ball a little too long, but it wasn't as bad as it appears now. And is it something mental? Is it something going on in this guy's head? Is it a situation now where, at one point, when you look at Carson Wentz, right? You look at 2016, he coming in as a rookie. Sam Bradford was here. You thought at one point Carson Wentz was going to get groomed, and he was just going to sit out, and Sam Bradford was going to take the lead. But the Eagles were able to trade Sam Bradford to the Vikings, were able to get some draft picks for Sam Bradford, and ultimately they said, you know what? We're going to start the rookie. And Carson Wentz played well, played solid. He was solid in his rookie season. And then so 2016, he was solid. But then you look at 2017 when he came back, and that was the year. That was the year that Carson Wentz, became big time. That was the year that we said this dude is going to be big time, is going to be around for a long time. It's going to put up some big time numbers for a long time. That was the year where he put up 33 touchdowns. That was the year where he led the Eagles and had the Eagles in great position to ultimately get to the Super Bowl. He gave the Eagles home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Ultimately, the Eagles were able to make the Super Bowl, but it wasn't with Carson Wentz. It was with Nick Foles. So, but they don't get let's be clear about 2017. Let's just be clear about 2017. 2017 doesn't happen without Carson Wentz. They don't win a Super Bowl without Carson Wentz having an incredible season. So let's be clear about that. I know Nick Foles, gets the credit, and rightfully so, for leading that team to the Super Bowl and getting that team a Super Bowl victory back in 2017. But none of that happens without the greatness of Carson Wentz in 2017. Doesn't happen. So let's be clear about that. He was able to get the team home field advantage, and they were able to ultimately march on to the Super Bowl. And one of the reasons they were able to march on to the Super Bowl is because they had home field advantage. But in addition, Nick Foles just played out of his mind. I mean, Nick Foles played out of his mind that particular season. The guy was just on fire. Played out of his mind those playoffs, especially against the Vikings and the Patriots NFC Championship game in the Super Bowl. There's not many quarterbacks who could play as well as Nick Foles played in the NFC Championship game and in the Super Bowl. I mean, the way he played in those two games where it was just he was out of his mind. And I don't know if Carson Wentz could have played any better. I don't know. There's not many quarterbacks in this league that could have played as well as Nick Foles played in those two games against Minnesota and against New England. Maybe the two best games, 2-game run in anybody's career. But obviously it's the best 2-game run in his career. I mean, that was an amazing run by Nick Foles. And Nick Foles is a guy who, if he gets streaky, if he gets hot, he's a streaky guy. So if he gets hot, man, he can put up some numbers. But if he gets cold, it's not very beautiful. But back to Wentz. So we look at Carson Wentz at this point in time, and we're saying, okay, this guy has to pick it up. And he's going into his bye week. He's going to his bye week on top of the NFC East. But he's going into his bye week now with an opportunity to get right, an opportunity to change some things, an opportunity to think about and assess and evaluate how he's played to this point and think about what he can do moving forward to turn this thing around for himself. Here's the thing for the Philadelphia Eagles. There's a good chance they'll win the NFC East, and there's a very good chance they'll win the NFC East. And I think at this point in time, considering the issues with the Cowboys, considering how the Giants are playing, and just considering the talent level on the Washington football team, it appears that the Eagles are the class of this division. That's not saying much, but it's saying something, but because, hey, you're going to make it to the playoffs. So it happens. And we've seen teams, the 7-9 Seahawks. I forget the year, but they were 7-9. They made it to the playoffs, and they ultimately had a home playoff game, and they beat the New Orleans Saints. So, anything is possible once you get into the dance, and anything is possible if you have a home playoff game. It's just that simple. So we'll see what happens, but Wentz has to get better. And I'm wondering, is it a byproduct of him looking over his shoulder and wondering, okay, Jalen Hurts is here. They drafted him in the second round. So being that they drafted him in the second round, they must have a future for him. They must have some plans for Jalen Hurts because they drafted him in the second round, and they took him very high. So they must believe that this guy, and they just signed me to a big deal. So they must believe that Jalen Hurts is the heir apparent on some level. They must believe that he could be a big-time quarterback in this league. You don't draft a guy in the second round, a quarterback in the second round, to be a gadget guy. You don't do it. So there has to be a reason why they drafted Jalen Hurts, and that why we may not know the answer this year. We may not know the answer next year. But at some point in time, we're going to find the answer and understand why the Philadelphia Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round. To me, it's very evident. To me, it's very obvious. They must believe that he could be the next big thing for this football team and the next quarterback of this football team moving forward when Carson Wentz, when they decide to say this is enough of Carson Wentz, or B, they decide to trade Carson Wentz or do whatever they're going to do with Carson Wentz. But at the end of the day, it seems like Jalen Hurts appears to be the heir apparent for this football team. We'll see how that goes. We'll see what happens with that particular situation. But Carson Wentz, I think he can. Obviously, I know he can play better, and I think he has to do a better job of protecting the football. He's got to do a better job of protecting the football. Maybe, just maybe, not taking the type of chances. Don't be afraid to throw the football away. Sometimes every play is not going to be a big play, so don't be afraid to say, you know what, this play is not going to be big, let me just throw it into the stands. Let me just throw it out of the end zone. Let me just throw it to the sideline. Let me just throw it away. Sometimes let me just take the sack. Let me take the sack instead of trying to make a play. And an attempt of trying to make the play, you sometimes turn the football over. So we'll see what Wentz can do moving forward. I think he can fix it. I still believe in Carson Wentz. I still believe he could be in a big-time quarterback that the team thought he was in 2017. I just think right now he's in his head. Something's going on in his head, and he's got to try to fix that moving forward. And even if he doesn't fix it, I think he'll have enough to get this team to the playoffs. But obviously, if he continues to play in this manner, this franchise, I should say, is not going to be very confident in what he has and what he is moving forward. We'll see what they do with Carson Wentz. You want to talk about another guy who struggled last week, and that was Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson is not putting up the numbers that he did last season. And last season was a big-time season for Lamar Jackson. I mean, last season, Lamar Jackson pretty much played perfect football. I mean, the guy put up some crazy, crazy numbers last season. Did some amazing things on the ground. 1,200 yards, had 36 touchdown passes, only 6 interceptions. Lamar Jackson did a lot of great things last season for the Baltimore Ravens. And this season has been a little different for Lamar. Not running the ball the same as he did last season. I mean, he had 1,200 yards last season on the ground, 7 touchdowns rushing. I mean, the guy put up some big-time numbers last season. And now this year, especially last week against the Steelers, where he struggled. And, he turned the football over. And those turnovers turned into points. And those that you can't have. You can't have. Lamar Jackson last season was darn near perfect. 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 3,100 yards passing, 66.1 completion percentage. I mean, Lamar Jackson pretty much had a perfect season last year for the Baltimore Ravens. He had a big-time year, an MVP season for Lamar. And now you look at Lamar, and the guy is struggling a little bit. He's turning the football over. 4 picks at this point. Only had 6 picks last season, the whole year. I mean, and he threw a pick 6 last week. That was big. That was huge. And so you look at Lamar Jackson, and for me, when I look at Lamar Jackson, I mean, I think at the end of the day, he's going to be fine this season. I think he's going to be fine. I think he'll turn things around. But when I look at Lamar Jackson, I always look at the playoffs. And I say to myself, okay, how's Lamar going to perform in the playoffs? How is Lamar going? What is he going to be like in the playoffs? Because I don't care about Lamar Jackson in the regular season. He's going to be fine. He's going to put up decent numbers when it's all said and done. His team is going to have a decent record when it's all said and done. My concern is what happens in the playoffs. And in the playoffs, his first 2 times in the playoffs, he struggled. He struggled in the playoffs. He struggled. And when you look at it, this guy last season, they got it. They played Tennessee Titans. They played the Tennessee Titans, and Lamar struggled. And the team got behind, and Lamar was forced to pass the ball a lot. And it got uncomfortable. He was forced to be behind. He was forced to play from behind. And playing from behind, it was a struggle for Lamar. It was a struggle. And ultimately, the Baltimore Ravens lost in a game that they should have won. A game, well, you look at it, they had home field advantage. They had the best record in the AFC. They were expected to play the Kansas City Chiefs. Many expected Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens to go to the Super Bowl. Many expected that. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And part of that was Lamar Jackson. Part of that was the way he played. So for me, when it comes to Lamar Jackson, the thing I focus on, the thing I worry about is what is going to happen come playoff time. What is he going to do come playoff time? Let's be real. That's what people are judged. Players are judged by what they do on the big stage. Players are judged by what they do in the playoffs. So Lamar Jackson is going to be judged by how he handles the playoffs and how well he plays in the playoffs. That's it. I think he'll fix. I think he'll play better, as the season goes on. But at the same time, that to me is irrelevant. What's relevant to me is how he gets it done come playoff time. Because as a rookie, if you remember, Lamar Jackson stepped in for an injured Joe Flacco. And ultimately, he was able to lead the Baltimore Ravens to the playoffs. He was able to get them there. And they got there, and waiting for him were the Chargers. Home playoff game for Lamar Jackson. And they lost. They lost to the Chargers in that particular game. And Lamar Jackson, there were some who were saying, bring in Joe Flacco. Bring in Joe Flacco. They didn't do it, but people were calling for it. They were calling for the team to bring in Joe Flacco because Lamar Jackson struggled for most of that game. And then late, he got hot. Started to make a few plays. But ultimately, it wasn't enough. Ultimately, in the midst of him trying to make plays and get some things done, it wasn't enough. And the Ravens would lose to the Chargers in that game, 23-17. And you say to yourself, well, at that point you're saying, well, he's a rookie. And he's going to be back here, and he's going to have many moments and many other times where he's going to play well and he's going to get done. He had 3 fumbles in that game, only lost 1, threw an interception, so he turned the ball over a couple times in that contest, threw for only 194 yards, and ultimately, again, they lost that game. But again, at that time, you said, okay, Lamar Jackson, rookie, he'll be fine, he'll get another opportunity, no big deal, right? And then last year, after having an amazing season, I mean amazing, after putting up all those numbers, 36 touchdowns to the 1,200 yards rushing, and winning the MVP, after doing all that, Lamar got to the playoffs. He got the team home field advantage throughout, and ultimately, again, had some struggles in the playoffs. And I'll say this, the Ravens defense didn't play that well in that particular game. They didn't play well. In that particular game. So it wasn't all on him. But you're the quarterback. And we all know what happens with the quarterback. We all know that the quarterback gets too much credit, and we all know the quarterback gets too much blame. And Lamar Jackson was the quarterback for that team on that day. And that team only put up 12 points on that day. And Lamar Jackson, and here's another thing, and again, that's why it's not all on Lamar Jackson. Derrick Henry was darn near unstoppable in that game. Derrick Henry put up some serious numbers in that game for the Tennessee Titans. So it's not all on Lamar. It's not all on him. And Ryan Tannehill only threw the ball 14 times in that game. Threw for only 88 yards. But Derrick Henry rushed for 195 yards in that particular contest. So it wasn't all on Lamar. It wasn't. But it was a situation where he had to come from behind. And, and obviously a guy like Lamar Jackson, as great of a runner as he is, he still has to improve as a passer. He did throw for 365 yards in that game, threw the ball 59 times, but he had 2 interceptions, and he had a fumble. So he had 3 turnovers. So it was a struggle for him. So end of the day, Lamar Jackson, for me, is not what he does now in the regular season because, again, he'll be fine. To me, it's what's happening in the playoffs. To me, I'm going to judge him on what happens in these playoffs. First 2 years, not so good. We'll see what happens this year. They're going to make the playoffs. But at the end of the day, to me, Lamar Jackson, I'm going to judge you on what you do in the playoffs. Because your first 2 times there wasn't good. We'll see what happens the third time. But Lamar Jackson, as far as I'm concerned, will be just fine. I want to go to boxing now. And today came down Canelo Alvarez, one of the most popular boxers in the sport. I mean, one of the guys that is a pay-per-view star at this point in the sport of boxing. Canelo Alvarez is now a free agent. He is a free agent. At one point, he was with Golden Boy Promotions. He fought on DAZN. At this point, he is a free agent. Canelo is free as a bird. So he's free. And now there are reports that he's looking to return on December 19th against IBF 168-pound champion Caleb Plant. And Plant is a PBC guy. So Canelo now out of his Golden Boy contract and looking to fight a Caleb Plant. That's a good fight. And I'm going to be honest with you. Going into that fight, I'm leaning towards Caleb Plant against Canelo in that particular fight. That's a big-time fight for Canelo. That's a type of fight where, Canelo, and here's the thing about Canelo Alvarez. Say what you will about the guy, but Canelo Alvarez has never been scared of a challenge. Canelo Alvarez has never been scared of a challenge. You look at the guy, he fought Mayweather maybe before he should have fought him as a young pup. He maybe shouldn't have fought Mayweather at the time that he fought him, but he stepped up to the challenge. He fought Erislandy Lara in a fight that many felt he shouldn't have taken. Took that fight, won. The guy he fights everybody. And so Canelo, this type of fight for Canelo, that's huge. That's not an easy one. Coming into, going up against Caleb Plant, that's not an easy one. And Canelo, if he does fight Caleb Plant on December 19th, well, he would have been out of the ring almost a year and a month. Last time he fought was November of 2019. So if he fights December of this year, he's been out of the ring a year. So there could be a level of rust for Canelo going. And so I don't know if it's wise, but this is Canelo Alvarez, and give Canelo a lot of credit. I don't know if it's wise for him to go from, being a year off into a fight with Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant is big time. That's a big time fighter there. Guy with tremendous power, tremendous ability. And for Canelo to go from being a year off into that type of fight, I got to give Canelo credit. This guy, I got to give him credit for that one. And here's the thing, the whole situation with DAZN and Golden Boy. Canelo obviously wasn't happy with Oscar De La Hoya. Obviously wasn't happy with DAZN, wanted to get the money that he was promised. Remember, he signed that big deal, with 14-fight, $365 million deal, supposedly with DAZN. And that didn't work out. Obviously, the pandemic didn't help much. The pandemic, which came down, coronavirus, COVID-19, that whole situation messed up a lot of people. And it's still messing up a lot of people. You remember Canelo signed that 11-fight, $365 million deal with DAZN back in 2018. But again, they came to a situation. Ultimately, DAZN obviously wanted him to fight Triple G, Gennady Golovkin. They wanted to see a trilogy, the third fight there, but that never came to fruition. And so Obviously Canelo, he did fight Sergey Kovalev. He won that fight. But, the pandemic is messing some things up. It's messing up a lot of people's money. Unfortunately, you had a situation even with ESPN laid off, 300 workers. I mean, that's a lot of people. It's a lot of staff. A lot of people that don't have jobs at this point during a pandemic, during an economic downturn on some level. So that sucks. But you look at Canelo, and this is a guy who is the cash cow in the sport of boxing. He is the most popular fighter in boxing at this point. He is the pay-per-view king of boxing at this point. He's the only guy at this point that probably could get 1 million pay-per-view buys. Him, Canelo Alvarez. And a fight with Caleb Plant would be huge. Would be huge. Absolutely huge. And so we'll see how that whole situation works out. But could you see Canelo, with PBC and the fights that could be made? One of the Charlo brothers, Jamal, and maybe Canelo at 168. Who knows? Errol Spence has been talking about maybe fighting Canelo, at one point in time. Caleb Plant, David Benavidez. There is a lot of options for Canelo with PBC if he does, in fact, sign with PBC or does something with PBC. There's a lot of money. And so it should be interesting to see how this works out. Does Top Rank throw something at Canelo? Is it going to be a PBC situation? Him and Al Heyman. Maybe he fights on Showtime. Maybe he fights on Fox. Fox pay-per-view and probably Showtime pay-per-view, because that's where Canelo's going. That's the only way you can fulfill his purse demands. So there's a lot of fights that could be made for Canelo Alvarez. And, this is a crushing blow for Golden Boy Promotions. Canelo was their guy. He was the biggest dude, the biggest fighter on their roster. He was the moneymaker for Golden Boy Promotions. He was. And they still got some decent talent on that roster, Ryan Garcia, Virgil Ortiz, to name a two. But at the same time, Canelo was your guy. He was your guy. And he's the reason you got that deal with DAZN. The reason that you were able to put some of your other fighters on DAZN was because of Canelo Alvarez. So not having Canelo is huge for Golden Boy. You wonder what's the future of their company. That's going to be interesting. We'll see what Oscar can do, if Oscar can get some more talent in that pipeline. But you look at the situation. Canelo's a free agent. And here's what I hope. Sign with PBC, sign with Al Heyman, and let's get those big fights on. Let's see Canelo Charlo. Let's see Canelo Benavidez. Let's see Canelo Plant. Let's see Canelo Errol Spence. Let's see all the fights that could be made at 168. Let's see them all. Let's see them all. Let's see them all. We've been waiting for Canelo to possibly have an opportunity. We all know the promotional situation. So the situation with him fighting Charlo, we knew that would be difficult for that to happen. We knew it would be difficult for him to fight Caleb Plant, David Benavidez, Errol Spence. We knew it would be difficult with him being with Golden Boy Promotions. But he's not with Golden Boy no more. So now at this point, he's not with Golden Boy. So let's make the fights. Too often in boxing, we don't make the fights. Too often in boxing, we have basically what we end up having is mythical matchups. We thought at one point in time Mayweather-Pacquiao was going to be a mythical matchup. It happened, but it happened later in their careers. We didn't expect to get that fight. We look at another fight, Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. We're hoping it's not a mythical matchup, but it could end up being a mythical matchup. We might not ever see it because of promotional issues. And when we actually do see it, both fighters might not be undefeated at the time, and both fighters might not be in their primes. So let's hope that happens. We saw it in the heavyweight division, Wilder and Joshua. At the time when they both were undefeated, it would have been a massive fight. It would have been a massive fight. But at this point, it's a mythical matchup, and it may end up being a mythical matchup forever. Because we might not see it again, or again, we might see it when those guys are a little long in the tooth and not in their primes. We don't see it enough in the sport of boxing where guys in their primes are fighting. We don't see it enough. So we got to fix that part of boxing. Got to fix it. You look at the UFC, and those guys get into the ring with each other. The top guys fight each other. It's that simple, plain and simple. The top guys in the UFC fight each other. We need that to happen in the sport of boxing where we have 50-50 fights. We need 50-50 fights. It's great. The sport needs it. Boxing is a great sport. But too many times it gets in its own way. Now Canelo's a free agent. Now he can, do some things without having to worry about this, that, and the third. So with him, again, so many great fights with PBC. So let's make them. Let's see it happen. Let's get Canelo in the ring with some of these guys, some of these dogs over at PBC. Let's see it. Let's see Spence. Let's see Benavidez. Let's see Caleb Plant. Let's see it. Let's see Charlo. Let's see it. And I think maybe, possibly, we could get it. There's a chance that maybe all those things happen. Maybe those obviously, we can't expect a man to fight those 4 fights in a row. That's a murderous row. You talk about Caleb Plant, talk about Charlo, you talk about Benavidez. We can't expect that man to fight all those guys in succession. But we can expect him, maybe to get it on with those guys, some of those guys, but not all in a row, obviously. But this is huge, and I think it's great for boxing. I think it's a good thing for boxing. I really do, because again, we can see Canelo in the ring without all these promotional stuff. We can see it with no issue and no problem. Again, there was no way with him and Golden Boy we were going to see him against Charlo. We probably weren't going to see him against Caleb Plant. Wasn't going to see him against David Benavidez. No way. But now all those things are out the way, and maybe, just maybe, we can get the big fights moving forward. I also want to look at last week, Gervonta Tank Davis headlining his first pay-per-view against Leo Santa Cruz, and it was a hit in terms of, what he did in the ring. Knocked Santa Cruz out cold in that 6th round. Vicious uppercut, beautiful uppercut, and ultimately Gervonta Tank Davis picks up Santa Cruz's WBA 130-pound belt. So Tank has belts now. I know he has the 135-pound WBA regular belt, but whatever. It's boxing has so many different belts. So it's just a mess at this point, but that's irrelevant. Let's talk about what Tank should do next. And I look at Tank Davis and I say, okay, I look at PBC and there's not a lot of guys at the 130, 135-pound division that he could legitimately fight without having to cross the street and having to deal with all those promotional issues, whether it's Burchell, whether it's Jamal Herring, whether it's Teofimo Lopez. Those guys there's not going to be a shot because they're top rank. And we've seen them work together in the past, but it's not always easy. So I think for Tank Davis, it's simple. Gary Russell Jr. I think he should fight Gary Russell Jr. I think that should be the next fight. It's logical. Gary Russell's looking to move up to 130. So Tank has a 130-pound belt. Russell's looking to move up. Russell is athletic. Russell is quick twitch. Russell is all those things. Russell is a guy, I think, that could give Tank problems, even beat Tank Davis. I really do. So you look at Gary Russell. He's signed with PBC. He's with Apple. So that is, we took the business aspect of it. It can be easily made. Both in the same stable. So both in the same stable, so we can make that particular fight. That's a fight we need to make. Guys who are under the same stable, both signed to Al Heyman. So in a fight, and I would love to see the fight with Gate. And I would love to see the fight in the DMV. Russell, DC, Tank, Baltimore. So put it in the DMV, put it somewhere, Maybe you put it at FedEx Field. Maybe you put it at Royal Farms in downtown Baltimore. Put it somewhere in that area. That's a massive fight if you put it in that particular area. That's a massive fight. I tell you, that's massive. Putting in that fight in that area with those two guys who have a decent level of popularity, that would be great. So I'm saying, Tank Davis, your next fight should be against Gary Russell Jr. And that's a fight, again, that two guys, and here's the thing with Tank Davis, I would love to see him, it's time to fight some bigger guys, and I know Russell is moving up. He fought most of his career at 126, but he's moving up. So, Russell and Tank is a good fight. I give Russell a shot. I didn't give Leo Santa Cruz a shot. I didn't. What transpired is what I kind of thought was going to happen. I didn't think Leo Santa Cruz would be able to stand up to Tank's power, and he wasn't able to do it. I didn't think he could, and he wasn't able to do it. So I look at that particular fight, and I say to myself, okay, you knew Tank was going to win that fight. The only fight that maybe you had some doubts with Tank was Pedraza. Outside of Pedraza, you knew that Tank was going to beat the guys that he's fought over the last few years. You knew it. Gamboa, you knew he was going to beat Gamboa. Fonseca, you knew he was going to beat Fonseca. You knew he was going to beat all those guys. Now, if he fights Gary Russell Jr., you don't know if he's necessarily going to beat Gary. You go into that fight and you say to yourself, well, Gary Russell can win this fight. You say to yourself, Tank Davis can win this fight. But you want to say, you want to be in a situation where you got some people who can say Tank can win and some people think Gary Russell can win. Going into this fight against Leo Santa Cruz, most people knew that Tank Davis was going to win that fight. Most people knew that Leo Santa Cruz wasn't going to be able to stand up to Tank's power. Most people knew that. We all knew that. Gary Russell's a different story. And so, to me, it's just the perfect fight. It's the perfect fight. And I would love to wait until we can get some gate, meaning we can get some fans, because I would like to see the fight. Maybe you do it at FedEx Field, even with the social distancing, and I don't know what the restrictions are at this point in Maryland, but maybe you do it at FedEx Field with the social distancing, separate people, and you still get a decent gate, still get a decent amount of people up in there. Maybe so. Maybe a next summer situation. Do it in the summertime, next summer, early in the summer. Tank, Gary Russell Jr., FedEx Field, or put it at M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore. Same situation. Put some social distancing in place if we're in that situation at that point in time, which I expect we will be because of COVID. But put some, do some social distancing and get some gate, get some crowd up in there. So again, I think that is the fight. Teofimo Lopez, sure, I would love to see it. I would love to see it, but that's not going to happen. It ain't happening. No, not happening. It's not going to happen because of the whole promotional situation. So I'm not expecting that. So I'm going to take what I can get. And to me, taking what I can get, to me, it would be Tank, Gary Russell Jr. That's the fight. Gary Russell Jr. wants to fight. He's called Tank out. He did a video recently talking about how much he wants to fight. So it's clear Gary Russell wants to fight. It's clear that Gary Russell wants to get in there with Gervonta Tank Davis. So let's make it happen. Do the fight. Al, make the fight. Floyd, make the fight. Tank, Gary Russell, get in the ring, and let's get this done. It's the best option we have, I believe. And I think it's a fight that should be made. But speaking of Tank Davis, he has a situation, possible hit and run out there in South Baltimore the other day. And when I look at Tank Davis, I'm not concerned about Tank Davis once he gets into the ring. I'm concerned about Tank Davis before he gets into the ring. Meaning, I'm concerned about, first and foremost, can this guy stay out of trouble? And he's had a hard time, it appears, doing just that. You had the situation during the Super Bowl where you saw him on video pulling the woman out, being aggressive with her. That was a bad look, caught on videotape and everything. That's a bad look. You have other situations out there, and we don't know what's going to happen with that situation with the woman and everything. At this point, we don't know. But that's bad. And then you look at the situation, there's various civil lawsuits in terms of jewelry and things of that nature when it comes to this guy. And now you have the situation with the possible hit and run situation out there in Baltimore. Tank's a guy now, going on 26 years old. He has an opportunity, I believe, because here's the thing: when I purchased the pay-per-view, I did buy it, Tank Santa Cruz. But one thing I noticed in terms of on Facebook, on Twitter, just social media in general, I saw a lot of females talking about this fight. I saw a lot of females commenting on this fight and talking about this fight. I saw a lot of boxing casuals talking about this fight. And that's good. That's what you want. You want casuals talking about the sport of boxing. That's what you want. Every sport wants the casual. That's why in football, they try to do things for you to score a lot of points. In basketball, they try to do a lot of things for you to score a lot of points because they want the casual fan to come. They know they're going to get the hardcore fan. They're always going to get the hardcore fan. They're fighting for the casual fan. And the casual fan was out in full force in terms of watching, I believe, that pay-per-view with Tank and Leo Santa Cruz. They liked Tank Davis. And I believe Tank was dating one of the females from, I think it was Love and Hip Hop. So, he does have a level of crossover appeal. But the point I'm trying to make is when it comes to Tank Davis, I'm not concerned about in the ring. I'm concerned about outside the ring. And I'm wondering if this guy can just stay right. Can he keep himself out of trouble? Can he keep his nose clean enough where he can continue to grow and be that pay-per-view star? Because I think he can be that pay-per-view star. I think he can be that guy. I just think, his style is exciting. He's got an exciting style in the ring. He's a good-looking kid. Maybe a little better in terms of being on the mic. Maybe he needs to improve in that area, but still, he's exciting in the ring. Decent-looking guy. And he's got some popularity. He went to Atlanta and got a decent crowd. He had a decent crowd in Baltimore, had a decent crowd in California. So he got 9,000 out there in Texas, at the Alamo Dome. So, that may not all be him, but again, he is a guy that has some popularity. But the problem is when it comes to Tank Davis, can he stay out of trouble? Can he do what he has to do before he steps into the ring, whether that's making weight and whether that's keeping his nose clean and staying out of trouble? I don't know. I don't know. And I want to say yes, because Tank Davis, to me, when you look at the kid, and again, obviously he's not an innocent guy, but when you look at the kid, he has an innocence about him, has a kid-like innocence about him. There's something about him that is a kid-like innocence when you're around him, and just about him in general. He has that. And again, he has all the qualities to become a pay-per-view star. But, and it's a big but, it's a Kim Kardashian big but type of situation. Can he stay out of trouble? And obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with that hit and run situation. It's all alleged. We don't know. But that is not a good look. Can he stay out of trouble? Coming off this big victory, coming off this big-time pay-per-view, coming off headlining his first pay-per-view. Doing all those things, all those great things, all those good things coming for him, and then he has this negative thing. You wonder, is the situation, he is a Baltimore kid, the alleged hit and run happened in Baltimore. You wonder if it's time for Tank Davis to leave Baltimore. You wonder if it's time for him to get out of Baltimore. And, it is very difficult once you get a level of fame to stay in your neck of the woods, to stay in the place that you grew up. It's difficult. It's not easy because you got a lot of people pulling at you. You got a lot of people tugging at you. And you can sometimes get comfortable in that particular situation. But when you're a guy like Tank Davis, who is becoming a star, there's certain things you have to do. There's certain ways you have to behave. There's certain places you can and cannot go. There's certain people that you can and cannot hang out with. It's that simple. Sometimes the people you bring to the dance, you can't leave with them, right? The people that you come up with before you became a star, Sometimes you can't leave with them. Sometimes you got to leave them at the dance. You got to go on your merry way. And it might be a situation where the guys, and I don't know who he's hanging out with, I don't know his friends, but it could be a situation where maybe he has to choose a different crowd. It could be a situation where maybe he has to, move out of Baltimore. Maybe he needs to go to Vegas full time. I'm sure there's a lot of temptation in Vegas, but maybe he needs to find a place. Florida, go. Kevin Cunningham's down there. Maybe he needs to go down to Florida and I know he doesn't trade with Cunningham, but maybe he can go find somewhere in Florida to go. He's got to find a place, and it might not be Baltimore. It's okay to leave your house. It's okay to leave your home, especially when you get a level of fame, a level of stardom. You can't stay in the same place forever, and it might be time for Tank Davis to think about that. Now, I'm not sure even if he goes to another place, he can stay out of trouble. I'm not sure about all that. But again, my concern, and as I started with this and I'll end with this, my concern for Tank Davis, it's not what happens in the ring, it's what's happening before he steps into the ring. And that is before he steps on the scales, and that is even before that, in terms of what is he doing to keep himself and his nose clean. He's got a little bit of money in his pocket, and now he's got to find a way to keep himself out of trouble. If he can do that, Tank Davis can be a star. He could be the next big thing in the sport of boxing. He has, I believe, he has an opportunity to be that type of guy. We'll see what happens when it comes to Tank Davis, but hey, it was exciting. And that knockout, you saw a lot of people posting it on social media and talking about it. It was a highlight reel knockout. It was the knockout of the year, possibly, maybe, at this point. That was a beautiful knockout by Tank Davis. And thank God, thank goodness that Leo Santa Cruz got out from that one. Because, man, I was watching with somebody like, oh, he's down cold. Is he dead? I mean, people were saying that. I mean, come on. I didn't think he was that. But, man, that was vicious. That was a vicious uppercut. But, again, I would love to see Tank in there with Gary Russell Jr. I think that should be next. I think it's logical. I think it just makes too much sense for Al Heyman, PBC, Mayweather Promotions, everybody involved to make that happen. So we'll see what happens. So make sure you come back to this YouTube channel throughout the course of the week. We're posting videos daily in the world of sports, whether it's NBA, whether it's NFL, whether it's the sport of boxing. We're posting everything, any baseball, any and everything on this particular YouTube channel. Before we get out of here, got to talk about the NBA. The NBA is expected to come back December 22nd. So the league is expected to come back December 22nd, and they're going to come back. Obviously, they're going to have that big Christmas Day slate that they have year in and year out, where they put on the marquee teams and the marquee names and the marquee players in the National Basketball Association. So when I look at the NBA, and you figure this, NBA draft is November 28th. So you figure the NBA season ends in June. About a week or so later, you have the draft. You have some free agency. That's usually tied up sometime in July. And then you have most of July. I mean, half of July, most of it, August. And in September, you get into training camp. So you have a couple months before you start doing everything and putting everything together. You have a little training camp, and you go on out. You start to get some continuity and so on and so forth. But now, draft is November 18th. All right? At some point, you got to get those guys in, and then you got training camp. It's got to start, and then you're starting the season December 22nd. So it's going to be a quick dash. It's going to be a burst. And you wonder who does that favor? You look at the Lakers, who, last team standing, Lakers and the Heat, last two teams standing. I mean, they just got done playing basketball, and they're going to jump right back out there. You wonder how that's going to be for them. It's going to be a disadvantage. Could be a disadvantage for them. And you got the team sitting on the sidelines like the Golden State Warriors with all those guys. They're reloaded. Second pick in the NBA draft, Steph is back. Klay Thompson is going to be back. Draymond is still there. Andrew Wiggins is there. So this is a team in Golden State that's going to reload and come right back at you. They're coming right back at you, locked and loaded and well rested. So, we'll see what happens there, but you got to give them advantage. I think you got to give the teams who have been together for a while, you got to give them an advantage. The Denver Nuggets, who been together for some time, they got some continuity. That's an advantage. You got to give them an advantage for that. I mean, you look at, we don't know what the Lakers are. More likely it's going to be Davis and LeBron, but there could be some other changes. But more than likely they're going to bring back the core guys. So they should be fine in terms of continuity. But again, they played late in the season. Miami Heat should have a level of continuity. I mean, but you look at teams with the new coaches, the 76ers, a team with a new coach, new system. We'll see what happens there. And Daryl Morey. So you wonder if he's going to turn this roster around, make some changes. I listened to Daryl Morey, interview with Daryl Morey this week, and it seemed like he was going to make some changes. Based off the interview that I heard with Daryl Morey, I walked away thinking the Sixers might not look the way they looked last season. There's going to be some changes. So the Sixers could be a team that's going to make some changes. And I think any team that's going to make some changes is a team that could struggle out the gate. It's supposed to be a 72-game season, and they're supposed to end in July, just in time for the Olympics. Now, I've always, and you wonder how many guys are going to go straight from the season into the Olympics. And obviously all the guys are not going to make the playoffs, and all the guys are not going to play late into the season. But you wonder how that's going to work out, what guys are going to do, and the decisions they make in terms of whether or not they're going to play in the Olympics. That should be interesting. But let's talk about the NBA at this point. I've always said, and I always wondered, I heard George Karl say this, I don't necessarily think a December to July is a bad idea. In fact, I think it's a very good idea, because here's the thing. You don't have to fight with the NFL. I mean, if you usually start the season end of October, early November, that's still the heart of the NFL season. You start December, late December, at this point, the NFL is winding down the regular season and into the playoffs. So you're not competing with that as much, and for as long as your football ends February. So by the time that's done, by the time February is done, you're still in March, and February you still got the whole NBA season to go. But I feel like starting in December is not bad, because you're not competing with football to the way you are now when you start in November. You're not competing with them. And we all know football is America's game. Football is the most popular sport in America. And so the NBA, and I think the NBA is coming. I think the NBA is going to come. And I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I think the NBA is going to be the Premier League. I think it's going to happen. I don't know when. I'm not sure when that's going to happen. Football has its own set of challenges in terms of the concussions and things of that nature. And people are not playing it, in the lower levels, not playing it as much. You see a lot of situations. I'm not letting my kid play. I'm not letting my kid play, so on and so forth. You're seeing a lot of that. But we'll see how that whole situation shakes out. But I just think you don't want to, if you have an opportunity to not compete with the NFL, don't do it. So if you start later in December, you're not competing with the NFL the way you are if you started in November. So I always thought that was a good time to start. And finishing in July, I don't think that's a bad either. We'll see how the whole situation shakes out. But the NBA is expected to be back December 22nd. And again, I think the teams who have the continuity, the teams who are familiar with each other, are going to be the teams that could have the most success this season. Or it could be a situation where, you could be a team that might take some time to mesh. So you could have a late blooming team that, struggled at points of the season, but near the end got it right, got it all together, and could be a force come playoff time. 72-game season, I'm not opposed to that. 82 games, that's a lot of games. 72, still a lot of games. I'm not opposed to that. I'm good with that. And the playing game, you're expected to have that. That was great. The playing game was good. And I say it all the time, it made a game or games that would be meaningless meaningful. So anytime you can make meaningless games meaningful, that's a good thing. So that's something that the NBA should keep. And I think it's something that it's going to work moving forward. I like it. I didn't know how much I would like it, but I liked it, and I like it a lot. So we'll see what the NBA does with that as well. They're expected to have that. That should be fun. But the NBA is expected to come back December 22nd. And again, they might want to think about keeping that December date. We'll see how that shakes out. Because again, like I said before, You don't want to compete with the NFL. And the less time you have to compete with the NFL, the better you are as a league here in America, because NFL football is America's game. I want to thank everybody for joining us, everybody for listening. Again, make sure you go to this YouTube channel. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and make sure you join the ride. Join the Ride is a big-time show, the Go For It podcast here with Paul Gann, talking sports and having fun doing it. So continue to join, continue to listen, continue to like, continue to subscribe. We hope you have a great weekend. See you later. Stay COVID-free. Take care.